Okay. Great. Welcome. Many of you here are actually either associated with one of the agencies that we're working with, may even be presenting. So, but we do have a couple landowners here, and I'm hoping a couple more will trickle in. We had about, 15 landowners RSVP, so we'll see how many folks actually do log on. Good news is that we already had 3 meetings, so this is the 4th meeting. So there may be people that did RSVP for this that had planned to attend another one as well, or may have attended one that they did not RSVP for and they RSVP'd for this one. So, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Elizabeth Davis. I work for Solano RCV. Probably see my name on one of the many emails that have gone out or any of our outreach information as the main contact of who to get in touch with. This is the Solano Prescribed Burn Association community meeting. They're intended as outreach to try and reach people, to talk about what prescribed burn associations are, talk a little bit about prescribed fire. We've got different agency folks here to kind of talk about that. So to give an idea of what the plan is, there we go. So the agenda, we're a little behind schedule, but it sounded like we needed to wait a little longer for folks to log on. We'll have someone from Cooperative Extension, so we'll have Morgan Doran, who's our local representative is not the right word, but our local UC Cooperative Extension. I'm going to think of the wrong title for you, but I'll have you introduce yourself. Speak a little bit about prescribed fire as a tool, and then I'll pass it off to Rob to talk briefly about liability permitting and regulation from CAL FIRE. And then I'll talk a little bit about what prescribed burn associations are with a little bit of help from some of the other PBA founding members of some other PBAs, and also share some survey results from the bigger survey that I sent out. And then the hope is to see some conversation. So as part of a community meet and greet, just so you can see who's actually part of this call, and then open the floor to discussion. This really is intended as a community meeting. So hopefully we get more people to log on as we keep going, since more people did show interest in showing up to this one. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Morgan.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. So yeah, my title, it is a bit of a mouthful. Livestock and Natural Resources Advisor with UC Cooperative Extension. I cover 4 counties, Napa, Solano, Yolo, and in Sacramento. And so what I am going to cover is, the use of prescribed fire and how to use it as a tool, especially with other tools in the toolbox. So if we can maybe move to the next slide. All right, thank you. So I think before talking about prescribed fire, it's really good to understand a bit about the plant communities, just have a basic understanding about the plant communities where prescribed fire is used. And you can see in that landscape, it's pretty representative. A lot of the plant communities that we have in many of the hilly mountainous regions of Solano County. We have some grassland in the foreground. In the medium ground, we have oak woodland. And way back there, probably a mix of woodland along with brush. So starting off with the composition of grasslands, they are almost entirely composed of exotic annual species. And exotic meaning they come from different parts of the world. Annual meaning they have an annual life cycle. They germinate in the fall, they grow in the winter, spring months, and they drop their seed, they die, and the seeds germinate when the rains come back. They are primarily of Mediterranean origin, introduced intentionally by the Spanish when in the 1700s, when they were colonizing or establishing missions up and down the coast of California. They brought with them domestic livestock. And along with the livestock, they brought seeds of forage plants that were native to the Mediterranean region, adapted to grazing, high quality forage plants. So that in combination with the high impact of domesticated livestock, which our native plant communities weren't adapted to, and thus went into decline from this heavy disturbance, grazing disturbance. They filled the gap basically, and really ended up transforming the plant communities, the grassland communities that we have in California, which are now annual grasslands, annual rangelands. And so they are well adapted to grazing. They co-evolved with grazers, with domesticated livestock. And so they are very well adapted to this recurring disturbance regime, both within the year and over multiple years. And they're very fire resilient. So you probably have seen our grasslands when they burn, and they do burn, they usually bounce back pretty quickly, getting back to where they were as far as abundance of forage and plant biomass within a couple of years. So next slide. Compare that to the California woodlands, which are primarily native trees and shrubs. We do have some introduced species, but primarily we have native trees and shrubs in these plant communities. They are too adapted to fire, but slightly different. They are adapted to recurring disturbances like fire and other disturbances like drought. And many species depend on fire for their reproduction, for just to perpetuate their plant communities. But frequency is really important for native trees and shrubs. If we have too much frequency, like we see in some areas, a good example of that is between Winters and the Berryessa Dam, is to the north side of 128. That area is burned repeatedly over a short number of years. And we've actually seen a pretty significant decline in some of the oak woodlands and on those hills. So too much frequency is bad for our woodlands, and too low of frequency means we have these really catastrophic fires like we had with the LNU that occur maybe once every 50, 70 years. And they're incredibly destructive, as we all witnessed. Next slide, please. So what happens when disturbance is removed is the top two pictures there are examples from Knoxville Wildlife Area. It's an area owned by Fish and Wildlife. It's north of Lake Berryessa. Hasn't really been managed actively for, gosh, probably going on 30 years now. It used to be grazed, and as soon as they purchased the properties, they removed all livestock grazing. So the picture on the top left, the oak woodland, so that's suffered quite a bit. You can see a lot of dead trees, and that's because these catastrophic fires have come through that area. And with the high vegetation fuel loads, the fires have been able to get into the canopies, kill the trees. So we're seeing this oak woodland decline for that reason. Over on the left, that too is the same general area, and it's a grassland, but it's heavily infested with lots of weeds. You can see in the foreground a lot of star thistle skeletons, and just all that dead material is really it's not good for wildlife. It's not good for hydrology. It's not good for forage in terms of forage for livestock, forage for wildlife, for the native herbivores. So really the ecosystem is, using a not too scientific term, is out of whack. It's not functioning the way it should function, especially with all of these exotic plants that are adapted to disturbance, that don't get the proper disturbance and create problems in this ecosystem. And the bottom picture is just seen, close to a home. It's very common to see this overabundance of woody vegetation right next to driveways, right next to homes, that creates obvious hazards for those homeowners. Next slide, please. So moving on onto the role of prescribed fire, I think we're primarily interested in fuel reduction in order to prevent these catastrophic fires that we have been seeing over the past several years. And the hope is to get to a point to where fire and other tools can be used for vegetation maintenance. Once you get hard control of some of the vegetation, is to get to a maintenance stage where you can use fire, kind of low intensity burns, along with other tools, kind of rotating tools over, from year to year. Next slide. Another role of prescribed fire is for weed control, and the bad acting weeds that we have in our area that are susceptible to fire, and fire can be used as Medusa head, which is the top left picture, and goat grass. These are both introduced, not intentionally, accidentally, or unintentionally introduced annual grasses, and they tend to create monocultures in the rangelands where they get it well established, and they degrade the ecosystem function quite a bit. Yellow star thistle is another one we're all familiar with. See that in the bottom picture. So the correct timing of a burn, prescribed burn, is really important for controlling these. For both Medusa head and goat grass, the proper time is when they're turning from green to brown. It's at that point where there's enough dry vegetation to carry a fire, and the seed heads are up in the air where they're exposed to the heat of the flames. If you wait until the seeds drop to the ground, the flame temperature is not high enough at that level to make the seeds non-viable, to kill the seeds. For star thistle, it's right before they flower. So once you have flowering star thistle, they're most likely viable seeds within a couple of days, and that's what we don't want. And so generally the time period for Medusa head goat grass in our area might be sometime in May, late May. Star thistle, sometime in May as well. Next slide. So another role of prescribed fire is just to restore ecological function. I've already mentioned some of these. When you have a lot of inappropriate vegetation, weeds, and too much woody material, it really disrupts the natural hydrology of the watershed, as well as for wildlife habitat, forage quality for livestock and for wildlife, and just to generally maintain our woodlands in a healthy state. And these are all what we call services, ecosystem services that we depend on in our watershed. And so the role of fire is to try to maintain and restore some of these ecosystem services. Next slide, please. So thinking about strategies for implementing, for using prescribed fire, it's important to remember that it's one of many tools and could and should be combined in an integrated manner. So we have grazing that can be used, hand crews for thinning, mastication, using big machinery for masticating woody material, and herbicides, and mowing. In that top picture, you see goats. They're coming in an area that hasn't been really managed for a long time. And what they do is they graze that low vegetation. They also can raise the canopy, the woody vegetation. And then after that, you can bring in crews to do some hand thinning. The bottom picture shows an area that was hand thinned. And then this is actually from the Atlas fire in 2017 came through. It really ripped through the area, but once it got to this area that was managed, the fire went down to the floor and didn't really burn the canopy like it did all areas all around it that had not been managed. Next slide, please. So a couple of examples of how you can integrate fire with these other tools. And one example is for yellow star thistle control. For controlling yellow star thistle, it's best to start year one with a prescribed fire, properly timed prescribed fire. And the reason for that is a fire is going to eliminate all the vegetation, let the sun penetrate to the soil, and what that does is it stimulates germination of seeds in the seed bank the following winter. So you get a good flush of seed growth that you can then kill again with other tools, or if you have enough fuel to carry a fire, another prescribed fire. So herbicide or other tools, and you can combine that with some grass seeding of desirable species. And then year three, so 3 consecutive years are really important for star thistle control, herbicide or other tools at your disposal. For woodlands, it's good, like these pictures demonstrate, is to start off with goat grazing, raise that canopy. Year 2, you do thinning. Year 3, you can use fire. And then you can do mixed species grazing. Perhaps you can use goats, or you can use sheep, or you can use cattle. But that first year, when you're trying to graze a lot of this woody vegetation leaves, best to use goats for that purpose. And there's one more strategy in the next slide, and that is for grassland fuel reduction. So once again, going back to this mess of a place in Knoxville Wildlife area, livestock aren't going to eat that. So it's not going to, livestock would not be a good strategy that first year. So good to use prescribed fire, kill all that dead stuff, get good flushes of fresh growth, and then you can use grazing or fire and grass seeding strategies the following year. Then you're into this maintenance phase where you can rotate different strategies over the years that come, whether it's grazing or prescribed fire that you can rotate. So there's a few examples of just some pretty simple strategy combinations that you can use in different environments. And I really emphasize that it's important in these situations to think about your goals and what you want to achieve, and then develop the strategies with the methods that you have in order to achieve those goals. And I can't emphasize that enough. So that's all I have. And I don't know well, anyway, I'll leave it right there. And Elizabeth, you can determine if and when there might be questions.
Yeah, no, that was great. I will do questions in a little bit. I think what we'll do is we'll kind of continue on our way with the presentations. And the hope is that if people have questions, they can ask them later. I'm going to pass it off to Rob. Rob, I don't mean to ambush you, but I actually have a couple slides for you that you can use or not use, depending on how you want to talk about liability and permitting. There's some maps of like air quality districts and things, so that might help facilitate some of those conversations. But yeah, and just to be clear with folks that are haven't been to one of our other meetings, these are just really brief intros kind of talking about liability permitting and just the regulations, because we will be covering them at future meetings based on just some of the other PBAs in the area and what they've decided to do, and the need that's been expressed through our surveys and even at some of these other meetings. So
yeah, go ahead and I guess show me that. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Let me move my screen here. I'm still learning how to use Zoom. I use Microsoft Teams here. There we go. Move that out of the way. So yeah, so burn permits, air quality regulations, and liability. So if there is going to be a burn in the SRA, which is the state responsibility area, it's actually, this map is nice because you can see the SRA is, looks like it's delineated yellow shaded, and outside that, for the most part, is all LRA, the local response area. So if you're ever going to be burning, whether it's prescribed burn, even pile burn and LE5 agricultural burns, it's going to be required, especially during fire season, and even times when we're outside of fire season, maybe like the beginning of winter when we're transitioning from fall, and also in certain times of the year when we're transitioning from the spring into summer, what we call fire preparedness months. We used to call it fire season and then not fire season. We had then realized, especially in 2015 and on, up and down the state, we're in fire season year round. So what we transitioned to calling it fire preparedness months, which is the summertime, and then we have winter preparedness. And so basically, it's a good map. If you're doing any type of pile burning or anything like that, prescribed fire, anything with fire in the SRA, and you're in these summer preparedness months, it's going to be required that you have an LE5. I'm not sure if I'm talking, I haven't seen this slideshow before, so I don't know if I'm going ahead of myself, but we can leave it on this slide for now.
You're doing great. Yeah. So what you do see, so this map is actually pulled from your guys' website. So that link I have here is actually on our website. So the CAL FIRE Burn Permit Responsibility Area Viewer, you can always look up your address as to where your burn area is. So I know you didn't know that, but you're covering great. So again, this is just brief intro. So you're spot on.
And so yeah, the LE5 inspection is pretty simple now. It used to be where a CAL FIRE battalion chief would come out and inspect the areas that you guys would want to burn within the SRA, and they would fill out a piece of paper in front of you. A lot of times now with technology and IT and the computer world, now we actually have it to where you can apply online, and it's pretty simple to find. Even if you just Google CAL FIRE burn permits, they'll take you to our new state database where the platform is very easy to use, and you can apply for whatever permit you're looking to burn, whether it's a regular standard 4x4 residential burn pile, or if it's going to be more than that, more piles or piles bigger than a 4x4, agricultural burns or prescribed fire, then you would submit the corresponding burn that you're going to be doing and get a permit for that. Once you fill out all the information, it's very simple. It triggers an automatic email to our pre-fire division, and then from there it gets dispersed to the local battalion chief having that jurisdiction. And it's as easy as us clicking a couple buttons, looking at the land, making sure where it's at in the SRA, identifying which county it's in, also what air pollution control has that jurisdiction. And from there, we usually place a phone call to the property owner or the association doing the burn that's applied for it. And from there, we would even ask for maybe pictures of what they want to burn, if it was just pile burning, or if it was a prescribed fire and they're burning a couple acres on the plots on their land. Even some pictures would suffice of what they're burning. And then we would attach those pictures in with the burn permit, and then we would allow you guys to burn. So in the winter time, however, I'd like to say that LE5s, LE7s, things of that nature aren't required. However, we're still telling people to apply for them because it's a lot easier for us to click the button and approve them now. And so that way we can track them a little bit easier as far as what's being burned, how many acres. So yeah, even though it's necessarily not required in the wintertime, we still want people to do it. And that way it notifies us when you guys are burning. If we see a smoke column down the road, we know it's been called in. We have a permit on file, and we know that it's good. So that should cover the LE5 part. As far as air quality. So if you are going to burn, no matter what time of the year, you got to have some type of air quality burn permit. And usually you apply for that with the corresponding air quality jurisdiction that you guys have. So I know there's Yellow Solano Air Quality Management District. There's Bay Area Air Quality Management District. They have those maps on their websites as well to see what location you fit under. But you do need to have a permit through air quality. And those are the guys that will actually come out and cite you if you don't have one. So it's fairly simple to get an air quality permit. You can do it online as well and submit your application. You can pay online. So not reading the
It's okay. Let me go back a slide. So what this says here, just it's giving a verbal description of the boundaries. So this is showing the Yellow Solano Air Quality Management District, which kind of cuts through the middle at Davis, is kind of, you can see halfway through is about, it's where Solano County is. So if you're looking up and down vertically, that's about half of it is Solano County. The rest of Solano County, if it's not included in this bordered area, is the Bay Area. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District wasn't able to make it out tonight, but we have a representative from the Yellow Solano Air Quality Management District if you have any questions later. And I'm going to keep going. We're going to go on to liability, which if you don't want to field some of this, then I can step in for the liability because I included a lot of some of the more recent legislation, but figured you might know things being CAL FIRE. So
yeah, I'll probably have you touch on State Bill or Senate Bill 926. I'll go over 332 for you. So what that bill did, it basically, so I'll talk a little bit about the history. So for, I'd say the 80s and 90s, a lot of people were heavily involved with prescribed fire, especially landowners and things of that sort. However, as time has moved on, a lot of people have worried about the liability, burning a neighbor's fence down, burning someone's home down, property, or damaging any other type of property, or injuring someone. So a lot of legalities there, and everyone was kind of questioning, well, what's the liability? What's the worst thing that can happen to me if I burn? So a lot of there wasn't much legislation to really protect the people trying to do the right thing, and that's putting good fire on the ground, and receiving the benefits that the good fire on the ground has, what was talked about earlier, right? And so what this did was we felt like there was a need in the state of California to bring fire back to that natural habitat and do some good, especially with these bigger, larger campaign fires have done with the destruction that has caused from 2015 and on. We realized, okay, we need to be able to have these local agencies and associations come together and get some good black acres on the ground to assist with these devastating fires. And also with the drought and everything that we was discussed earlier, we're getting these fires that are burning tremendous amount of acres, burning down homes and property. So this legislation that came about is actually really good. I'm not here to tell anyone. I'll give you my perspective on it, and I'll try not to tell you or persuade you one way or the other. And I'll tell you kind of what CAL FIRE lawyers look at it and what they say to you. So with 332, basically it applies to simple negligence versus gross negligence. So the gross negligence part is if someone decides to go burn, they don't have anything in place. Let's say they don't have a prescription, air quality. They don't have a necessarily a qualified burn boss and that sort. They don't have a plan together, and they just put fire on the ground. And they burn someone's property, whether it's a fence, whatever it is, and it burns an extra 200 acres of the area maybe they didn't want to burn. They're not going to be protected under SB 332 under gross negligence. So what 332 covers is those people that have everything in place, right? And what it also covers is only for suppression costs for the most part. According to our lawyers too, because I'll talk to them here and there just to get some more information on their take on this. It doesn't cover you underneath a civil suit or anything like that. You burn someone's home down, SB 332 is not going to cover you if you're going to be sued civilly through that property owner. And so I had that discussion just last week with a couple of our guys, our staff chiefs in Sacramento, just about the liability and stuff. So, but what SB 332 does is it allows associations, organizations to burn. And as long as you have everything in place, as stated in 332, we had kind of talked about, then you'll be good as far as fire suppression costs. So I wanted to kind of delineate that.
That's great. So building off of what you just said, Rob, so that's where the bill 926 comes in, because the prescribed fire claims fund is there to actually cover those third-party damages. So that's when you're burning under a certified burn boss. So when this came into effect, I think it was just in 22, and it was kind of near the end of 2022, they started certifying burn bosses here in the state of California. So if you're burning with a certified burn boss, if your fire were to get out of hand and were to burn down, say, your neighbor's house, the prescribed fire claims fund would actually cover the costs, so that if someone were to try to bring you to a civil suit for that, it would actually cover that. So like Rob was saying, 332 is its protection so that you can actually get assistance from like CAL FIRE, who will come and put out the fire. And then 926 is intended for third-party damages, just to be clear. And I'm going to go real quick. We are planning to have a meeting later to go really in depth onto liability, because we understand it's kind of complicated and there's a lot to talk about. So again, this is just really a brief intro, and there's more information on our website. So at the Solano RSC website, there are handouts that have really great information that you can access in our links. But I just want to be clear real quick. So as it goes with prescribed fire, if you're burning on your property, the landowner is liable if a prescribed fire escapes, like we just said. That there are laws or legislation in place that's intended to help protect you by their increasing liability protections. And then the other thing is that mitigating risk is the best way to address liability in prescribed fires. So making sure you're including neighbors in the planning and implementation, obtaining and complying with the relevant permits and regulations. Again, if you don't do those things, those first two things also don't actually protect you. Ensuring that you've planned and prepared your burn unit adequately. This one's really important. And then keeping CAL FIRE and your local fire agency informed, and making sure you're working with equipment that's in proper working order. So on that, I'm going to transition to our next discussion. I know we've had a couple more people join in. So and looks like Tracy shared some information on some of those pieces of legislation. So what is the Prescribed Burn Association, which is why y'all are here to kind of talk about that here in Solano County. In brief, Prescribed Burn Association, or PBA, it's a community-based mutual aid network where landowners or land managers work together to get prescribed fire on the ground. Big thing here is it's people. People are what make PBAs work. It's not us agencies. It's not we can want something to happen all day, but it's private land where we're trying to get burns to be happening, and it's people who make that happen. PBAs, what they're intended to do. So let me back up, but agencies can assist, and you have to go through the permitting and the regulations and actually work with your local fire agency so they know what's going on. But if you actually want PBAs to work, it's people-based work. So what PBAs can do, though, is they can provide educational resources, training, and information about prescribed fire. They can help build a culture around prescribed fire, do things so that it's more ecologically minded, safe and effective, working together. You can have like tools and equipment that's readily available either between landowners, or you can have stuff that belongs to the PBA itself. PBAs can also assist with planning and the permitting process. And the big thing is often they just help with some of the coordinating of personnel and the resources, like how do you get people where they need to be if somebody's trying to do a burn. So that's briefly what a PBA is. And then how they would, oops, it's not changing slides. How do they work? How do prescribed burn associations generally work? So how we have seen them work in other parts of the state, which we'll get a little bit into what different PBAs currently exist in the state of California. How it would work if you were to say you wanted to burn on your land and you wanted to work with your PBA, generally you become a member of your local PBA. Usually that comes with some kind of fee, which that's going to vary. You're going to contact your PBA for help. You're going to say, I want to burn X, Y, or Z on my property. So then the PBA would provide or help connect you with technical advice or with resources. So it might be just that you're like, I want to burn. I know how to do the permitting and everything. I just need people to come out and help on this day. And so the PBA may do something simple to support the burn. It may just, if there's a steering committee, it may go through, if it's really going through the whole works, it may go through a steering committee review if there's one that's decided for a PBA. Not all PBAs have steering committees, but that's where that kind of would slot in there. But they may just help with the coordination outreach to other people who are interested in burning. And that's one of the big things that PBAs do, is just kind of coordinating and pulling people together. On the day of a burn, the landowner is the one who's going to be hosting the burn. So often what we're seeing is that the landowner, in coordination with the PBA and maybe a burn boss, if they're working with a burn boss, would be responsible for most of the planning and organizing. So that means, you're going to get people together. You're going to make sure your burn unit's prepped prior to the day of. Often we're seeing that landowners are providing food assistance for any burners that they're having come out. So since you're not paying the people who are often on the ground, since there's usually other landowners, then you're going to have people, you're going to feed them for doing all the hard work. If you're having a local volunteer fire department come out, or a local fire department, fire protection district come out, we often see that donations are a pretty common practice. This is voluntary, it's a donation. But often if they're bringing out a big water truck or something, this is a good way to kind of give back to the local fire department. Again, this is a practice that we're kind of seeing at other PBAs. None of this is set in stone, but this is just generally how we've seen this going. And Tracy, Tracy Kettleman's a consultant who kind of helped with some of other PBA formation, and she's gonna speak a little bit about other PBAs. But did I forget anything important here? Okay, great. Then what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna move into kind of what structures other PBAs can kind of have. So PBA structures. So they're a couple of different ways they can look. And I'm going to kind of go in depth a little bit into each of these, and then we'll give you examples. So number one, it's a very loose network of landowners and organizations. So maybe you've got like a group email, maybe a listserv, maybe bylaws, maybe not. Maybe a memorandum of agreement, really nimble, easy to navigate. They can accept small donations and grants, but really small money. They can't hold larger amounts of funds. Or apply for bigger things simply because they don't have like a holding body to do that. The second one, which we actually see quite a bit of here in California, or at least ones that are a little bit more formal, is that you're utilizing a non-profit fiscal sponsor. So a nonprofit fiscal sponsor is someone who's either like a nonprofit. It could be a not-for-profit, so that might be a government agency. So for example, we are a government agency, which is a not-for-profit, or a nonprofit, which you guys are probably familiar with. It's like somewhere you can donate money to. It's like an organization. Like there's a lot of fire safe councils that have decided to become nonprofits. If you guys are familiar with fire safe councils, yeah, a lot of government agencies can be a not-for-profit fiscal sponsor. And the idea of a fiscal sponsor is they're just someone who can apply for grants and hold the money and disperse it as part of that. What that means, working with a nonprofit fiscal sponsor or working with multiple nonprofit fiscal sponsors, because you don't have to necessarily work with one, you can access larger amounts of money, so more grant funds, still relatively nimble. You don't need a board of directors, but often you have more of a steering committee. There's more red tape because if you're accepting state funds, you have to actually navigate some of the state or federal permitting requirements, so which are often called like CEQA or NEPA. If you're not familiar with those, that just means we have to do, those are from the state and the federal, like the EPA or the Environmental Quality Act here in California. So we have to actually go through some of those processes if we're using state funds or if we're working on state lands. So there is more red tape that's involved, but not everything you do has to necessarily go through that full process. There are ways that a nonprofit fiscal sponsor, even a local agency, can assist without necessarily doing the whole process. So it varies a lot. So I don't want to get too hung up on some of the red tape, but it does exist. And I want to be clear about that. They often have a fiscal sponsor as a board. So on bigger decisions, they might have a bigger say. They likely will have a bigger say, but, and a fiscal sponsor will take a percentage of the money received. This usually has to do with like grant writing and actually doing all of the reporting on any funds that they've pulled in. So that's usually what that's referring to, or paying the person, that's doing the work, to get things moving along. And then the third option, which we haven't seen as much, but there's an example of this, is that establishing a nonprofit. So you're going to have a steering committee, a board of directors, an email listserv. You're usually probably going to have really durable bylaws, and you're going to have a board. You can accept unlimited amounts of grant money, but this is like really labor intensive and expensive to set up and maintain, because basically that means you're going to need to be able to hire people and keep them on, as you continue on. So, and it's going to be more bureaucratic because you're going to have a board. So those are kinds of different kinds of structures. And I'm going to have a couple people speak. So both Bailey Adams, who's here from YOLO PBA, I'll have her talk, and I'll have Tracy, who's helped with the founding of the Humboldt PBA, kind of speak about some of the other, both of theirs, and then I'll kind of briefly talk about some of the other ones. So either Bailey or Tracy, if either of you wants to speak about the other PBAs here in the state of California, would be great.
Looks like I'm starting. Oh, there we go. Both of us are. Go ahead, Bailey.
Okay. Okay, I'll take it. I'll start us off. Hi, everybody. My name's Bailey. I work for the YOLO County Resource Conservation District, and I coordinate the YOLO PBA, which we just formed about a year ago now. And what that came out of was work from the RCD coordinating the YOLO County Fire Safe Council. And as part of that, there was some interest from landowners to start implementing prescribed fire. And so we took that as an indicator to go and find some funding, and we were lucky enough to secure some funding from CAL FIRE. And we are using that to support my position and acquire equipment and coordinate our PBA. The way that we operate is kind of that middle level of what Elizabeth said. The RCD operates as a fiscal sponsor. We're able to secure these larger grants, have a little bit more structure and some more red tape that comes along with that, but we're still able to get things done fairly well. So I'm also really excited that this conversation is happening in Solano, and we're just really excited to support everybody and see where it goes.
And Bailey, since you didn't bring it up, they've got a really cool equipment trailer, which is an example of things that you can use grant funds to get, and people can use the equipment trailer with less of the red tape. It's just an example of ways to work with a fiscal sponsor while avoiding some of the red tape. So because if people are borrowing things that were bought for the PBA, that's the way to do that.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit about Humboldt. So hi, my name's Tracy Cattleman. I'm a consulting forester, and I've been supporting Solano RCD and YOLO RCD with their PBAs. And I was a founding board member of the Humboldt PBA, which was the first PBA that got started on the West Coast back in 2017, 18, I think it was. And when we formed, we started out, so Lenya Quinn Davidson and Jeff Stackhouse, who are colleagues of Morgan's at UC Extension, did the initial investigations, called the first meetings. And so they were paid through their regular salaries and brought a bunch of people interested in the community, a lot of ranchers and others interested in prescribed fire. And we decided through these mainly social events, we did a lot of it around barbecues and outdoor meetings, that we wanted to form a PBA. And so we elected a founding board. And then that board was meeting regularly, and we were going to form a nonprofit, but then we realized we didn't really need to form a nonprofit. We drafted really simple bylaws. And though the bylaws and basically the board still continue as the way the organization functions, but it's not a legal entity in terms of being its own nonprofit or anything like that. And instead, what the Humboldt PBA does is they get grants through various fiscal sponsors. So as Bailey mentioned, YOLO RCD got a grant from CAL FIRE, and they started the YOLO PBA. Well, in Humboldt, they started the PBA, and then through the Yolo County Fire Safe Council, they got one grant to support that. And then they've gotten other funding through UC Extension. I know they got funding from the California Deer Foundation, and I don't remember who California Deer made that grant to pay for the equipment trailer. So basically, it's a structure that allows them to be pretty flexible, nimble, I think is the word Elizabeth was using, to see who might have grant funding to support it. And then provides a lot more flexibility in terms of when CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, applies. Because if you're private people doing private burning on private land without government funding, then you do have to do your burn permit and your air quality permit, but you don't have to do full CEQA analysis.
Yep. Great. So those are two examples of people who, one is locally working. So YOLO is our neighboring county, and they've been at our previous conversations, and they'll come up a little bit later. And then Tracy has helped and has a lot of experience. Humboldt's been around the longest of the PBAs in the state. So I'm just going to go over a couple of the other ones that exist just to kind of give you an example. So the Good Fire Alliance, which works in multiple counties, so it works in Sonoma and Marin. It's working with Cooperative Extension out in Sonoma, and then also with Audubon Canyon Ranch, which is a nonprofit, to receive some of their funds to help keep the PBA going. Napa PBA also working with Cooperative Extension and an RCD. Both of those entities have brought in funding to kind of feel things out. They're really working towards having it be mostly landowner run, maybe not having as much funding going in consistently from their fiscal sponsors, but they have been trying to get some funds to kind of help fund things, though I think they're trying for a more landowner-led approach. Placer PBA, they've got Cordy Craig is really active with Placer RCD. I think it's CAL FIRE funding them out there. And her position is to really coordinate what's happening with the PBA there. Plumas Underburn Cooperative. So this is, they're using both a nonprofit, so the Plumas County Fire Safe Council, and then they're also working with an RCD. And then an example of working with a nonprofit, there's Santa Barbara County Range Improvement Association. So it's a range improvement association. So they've probably been around for a long time. So they already have a structure that they're likely working under. So which is a good option if you're trying to work with a nonprofit, because it's likely already set up and something you can kind of run with already formed structure. And if that's not their only goal is burning, that does help with that. So those are just some PBAs just to give you an idea of what's happening. Great. And I'm gonna move on to our next slide. So I sent out a survey to a lot of folks. We sent it in the mail. So we've had actually like more than 90 people respond, which is amazing. So in terms of some of those results from those surveys, and this is throughout, mostly we were focused on the WUI. So that's the wildland urban interface. So we're talking about areas where we're really higher fire risk. So, And here's some of those results. So if you people who are interested in implementing prescribed fire on their property, we've got 48 people that said yes. That's a little skewed because some people answered it multiple times. So it's probably closer to 40, but 40 people have said yes, and a bunch of maybes, which is totally understandable. People are no's, also understandable. Some people that weren't really in the region for that. Folks that asked, have they participated in any kind of burn? So we've had more than 50 people that have participated in pile burning, less than 10 that have done broadcast burns, a handful have done some cultural burns, and again, a little bit more than 10 doing agricultural burns. Plenty of folks, actually same number of folks have no burn experience as people that have current or previous firefighting experience, and then other, which I'm not gonna go in and look at that. And then what are barriers that people are seeing to prescribed burning? We're all over the place. So some of the big ones, so education or information about prescribed burning is a really big one. Lack of experience with implementation. Then tools, equipment, or assistance is probably next. And then permitting is a big one. Actually, I'm going to kind of call that one out because I didn't include this, but liability is one that popped up a lot in others in terms of barriers. And then lack of community support is another one that people brought up. And then there's 7 people who don't see any barriers to prescribed fire. And I think some of them have actually shown up to some of our previous meetings because I've talked with a couple of them. And they're like, oh, I don't have any trouble with burning. So, which is great. And I hope they've shown up to some of our meetings. From there, some of our other more qualitative as opposed to quantitative results, things that people brought up when asking what resources would people find helpful: training, online resources, education or on best practices, learning through participation, connecting with fire agencies. They have been shown up to our meetings. There's definitely going to be more communication with them moving forward. So that's a good one. Access to tools, and then educational materials that people are looking for: flyers, mailers, handouts describing the benefits of prescribed fire, demonstration open to the public and along major thoroughfares. Some people suggested specific roads they'd love to see prescribed fire happening on. And then also more information on how prescribed fire can help control invasive species. Great. To give you kind of a recap what's happened in the previous meetings, we've had more than 40 people. I should actually have looked up the numbers and I didn't. I think we've had more than 50 people at this point between all 3 of those meetings. We've had different folks at each of the meetings. So the Fairfield, Vacaville, and Rio Vista meetings are actually, I was actually shocked at how many people we had at our Rio Vista meeting. People kind of came in at the last minute and I was very excited about that. We've had representatives from both of our air quality management districts, CAL FIRE, our local fire agencies, other PBAs, UC Cooperative Extension, the Land Trust. I think the Farm Bureau was actually at one of our meetings too. More than 30 landowners and land managers from rural Solano County have attended. Things that people have shown interest in future meetings covering is liability, permitting and regulations, and steps to coordinate and put on a prescribed burn. There's been a lot of discussion about liability and air quality restrictions at all 3 meetings. Those are big ones that come up a lot. Multiple attendees at both the Vacaville and the Rio Vista meetings are already familiar with implementing prescribed fire on their properties. Rio Vista was like a lot of ranchers out in the Montezuma Hills area, and they use fire pretty regularly. And there were folks in the Vacaville meeting who also use fire with some regularity. And then actually conversations at our last 2 meetings did actually lead towards conversations about joining YOLO PBA. So, and YOLO PBA is here, so they can join in on that conversation if that comes up again today. But there were folks that I think almost unanimously at Vacaville were really interested in actually joining YOLO PBA. A lot of that conversation centered around, we work really closely together. These county lines are just lines. We do share our air quality management district for at least part of our county. Anytime we have to do any sort of permitting work, we're working with very similar folks. We share CAL FIRE. There's a lot of things we share. Our RCDs actually work really closely together, but that was a discussion. There's also landowners who own property on both sides of the line when you start talking about big ranches. So, and then from there, I think we're gonna have people go around and introduce themselves. We're gonna go kind of brief. I can start. My name is Elizabeth. You've already heard me talk a lot. I work with Solano RCD. I'm in Dixon right now. I work all throughout Solano County. And then I'm interested in working on a PBA because I really want to help get good fire on the ground. I know fire is really, really important for the landscape here in California, and I know it would really benefit native wildlife and wildflowers, and just it would be really, really good for the land, and I'm happy to be here. So that's me. I'm gonna hop to Bailey since you're the one I see first on my screen, and then keep going.
Muted. There we go. Yeah, my name's Bailey Adams. I live in Davis, and like I said, I work for the YOLO RCD. My interest in prescribed burning comes from a background in restoration and conservation. In order to do that work well, prescribed fire is a component of that. It needs to be on this landscape. It is intrinsic to the ecosystem health, and I want to be a part of bringing that back. So yeah, thank you.
I think Rob, and since you've already introduced yourself, but just briefly again.
Yeah, how's it going, everyone? Rob Watson, Cal Fire Battalion, Sonoma Lake Napa unit. I'm currently the Battalion 1415, which is the Lake Berryessa Battalion. Covers all the way up from Northern County, the Lake County, North Carolina, Berryessa Estates, Pope Valley area, down to the Martinez Bridge, including all of Solano County and the SRA within it. And also from the top of the valley floor, Kenzo Estates and Monticello, all the way over to the Lake Berryessa Dam. So I've had this position now for about 4 months, transferred over into it from my previous job as the administrative relief battalion chief within the unit. A lot of my experience with prescribed fire is boots on the ground on VMP burns within the administrative unit. Worked a lot over in Yolo County on our Highway 128 burn that we do every single year, and also get involved with a lot of our existing projects that we have going on, various states that we're going to be also burning, and also assist over at CMF and more in Solano County. So I kind of jump around and help out and assist with a lot of different fire safe councils and PBAs, also including the Napa County PBA. And I've also helped out with Bailey Adams when they were kickstarting their program over there. So it's good to see that organization grow. And so I look forward to helping out and assisting with this one.
Lost Wesley. Let's hop over to Karen real quick.
I can unmute. Hi folks, Karen Young. I'm a project manager at Solano Resource Conservation District. I'm a Yolo County resident, but work throughout Solano County, and just knowing that fire used to be more of a prevalent force on our landscape, I'm eager to see it easier or made easier for landowners to use in achieving their landscape management goals.
Pam, I don't know if you can unmute.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I've got acreage in Mix Canyon and have for years been trying to keep that very pristine area that has never been grazed, no roads, no invasive species, in good shape. So that's involved, a lot of stewardship over the years, but it's really a drop in the bucket at this point, what I can do with hand crews and myself trying to take care of the incredible overgrowth of invasive species now that we have. So I'm very interested to see if we could get a little more regional approach and see what we can do to reduce the fuel load that's growing in an alarming fashion right now.
Thanks, Pam. Kenny with the Air Quality District.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenny Doss. I'm the Senior Air Quality Specialist at the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. I live in Davis and our office is in Davis. I'm also the Air Quality Inspector in charge of inspections for the Vacaville, Winters, Dixon portion of our district, and I help manage our open burn program. And my interest in prescribed burning is to help folks who are interested in prescribed burning have a good relationship and communication with the air district to get their prescribed burn projects completed.
You want to go, Paul?
For those who don't know, my name is Paul Dawn. I'm the prevention captain for Vacaville Fire District. I've been with the district for more than 20 years, and I'm a retired fire inspector from Travis Air Force Base. With 20, and I've had 27 years of federal service, and I've worked a lot with the land agencies in the younger part of my career. My concern over the PBAs is how that's going to affect our area and what our involvement as Vacaville District is may be involved if and when they become formed.
Morgan, you want to introduce yourself again? And then I think Chris, I think you have a big room of people potentially. I don't know how many people you got.
Yeah, so yeah, Morgan Doran, and I live in Winters, and so outside of my cooperative extension job, I am interested in seeing prescribed fire being available and used as one of several primary tools of vegetation management, so that we can just have better managed landscapes that are less prone to devastating fires.
Right. And then Chris, I don't know if you guys can unmute in there if you have your setup.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we just finished a board meeting, and we're lucky to get in the last half of this. My name is Chris Rose. I'm the executive director for the Solano Resource Conservation District, and my interest is in doing more of this, working with different folks that are involved and possibly getting more good fire on the ground for field management, but also in getting more restoration on the ground and managing restoration projects.
Is there anyone else with you, Chris, or is it just you?
It's Caitlin.
Oh, it's just Caitlin. I thought Randy was joining. That's why I
She
called him.
decided to. She's gonna. One of our board members is gonna watch the
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
recording.
And then I think it's just Beck, and then it's actually it's Pam. I think it's just you who's not an agency person. I think we lost Wesley partway through the meeting. And we had somebody else. Who was it? I can't remember her name, but yeah. Anyways, Beck, if you want to introduce yourself, and then Pam, if you want to talk, we could talk. But otherwise, I think a lot of our conversation happened in other meetings. But go ahead, Beck. So
yeah, sure. My name is Beck Vanderstoel. I'm with Solano RCD. I'm a project coordinator. My interest is I'm just excited to see a PBA potentially get off the ground. I saw the devastation of the LNU 2020 complex fire, and that was very it was just very meaningful to me. I know as far as fire goes in California, it's not if, but when. And so I want to see communities adapt for both ecological benefit and for community safety.
thanks. Yeah, Pam, if you've got any questions, I think that's where we're at this point. Because most of us here are either helping with some of the regulation or fire agency or agencies trying to receive funding to help get fire happening. So the floor is open if you have any questions.
Well, I'm pretty familiar, and so this has been good review and nice to meet people. I guess my only kind of initial question is this anything that might happen in the next 3 years or something, or is it helps me making decisions about how much I'll keep going on this very slow method I'm using now.
Yeah. So based on previous meetings, so I kind of did a recap before this slide. Let me go back actually. So we had a lot of people actually at our last meetings. I don't have the exact numbers. We did have some people that were repeats, but we did have quite a few people attend. And I had more people that had signed up to attend than actually did show up tonight. So, but you can't predict who's actually going to show up for something just off of our RSVPs. But there's a lot of interest. There are people that already know how to burn. There's people that are really interested in burning. Like I said, with some of those polls that we've had throughout the county. So those polls are numbers like from people who responded to surveys in the last couple of months who are interested in getting fire on the ground. Our organization has some funding to help with some of the planning. Again, any planning that we're doing is going to have to go through some of those CEQA processes. Any of those regulatory environmental processes, but that doesn't mean that other burning can't happen as well. I mean, of course, still following, your local regulations and getting the required burn permits, but there's people that do that all the time without us. But there's definitely been interest. We've got about 80 people who have signed up for the emails to kind of keep tabs on what's happening. So given that level of interest, we're going to keep moving forward. So I'm going to move on to like kind of what next steps are. We're going to skip some of the bigger discussion prompts. It's, like I said, not as many people, but in terms of next steps, so we're going to be sharing the results of these initial meetings, just kind of giving a recap of what discussion kind of happened. What's up?
Elizabeth, can I just interrupt, backtracking a little bit there? So to all of that interest, to answer Pam's question is that we hope that this is something that will happen within the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
the
great,
hope is
thanks.
it'll keep going. Yeah. And soon. So the information from these meetings will be sent out to our email list and it'll be up on our website. And then I'm hoping to schedule a meeting in the next month or two following up on one of those topics.
I have
So,
one follow-up question.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we are restricted to the 4x4 residential burn piles, right?
that is a question for one of our CAL FIRE. I mean, if you follow the other permitting processes and
Repeat that question.
Are we, in the meantime, limited to 4x4 typical residential burn piles?
As of right now, you can apply for a standard 4x4 residential burn permit. During the winter preparedness months, which we're currently in right now, our department is trying to get people to apply for the burn permit and we will just automatically approve them. Technically, as of right now, during the winter preparedness months, it's not required for CAL FIRE. You still have to have their pollution control permit. But even for agricultural burns, you still don't need to have, that's for piles larger than 4x4. You still don't need to have an LE5 for that, but we're still asking residents to apply for the burn permit. And that way also we can, it's another form of tracking for us to where if there is a large column kind of in the area that our cameras do see, we can kind of see the vicinity of that area and also cross-reference where the location is. And we'll be able to see if there's a burn permit on hand too. So
Yes, of course. And so the answer is yes, we are restricted to 4x4s right now, right?
if you have an agricultural burn permit, LE5, which is another permit that you can apply for on the same website,
Yeah.
burn larger than a 4x4 pile.
Okay, I do have that, but I think it's expired. But yeah, thanks. I'll check it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, kind of answering that question in a different way, Pam. You don't need a PBA to do prescribed fire. You can organize these things using a burn boss or getting people together. This is just one avenue to kind of help facilitate things. That's kind of the point of PBAs, is that they're just there to kind of help with facilitating, especially if you need more hands or tools. But plenty of people do broadcast burns or larger pile burns, going through the permitting and the regulations on their own. So we aren't necessary, but we're often helpful. And I think that's, yeah. So
Okay. Thank you.
just to be clear.
Thank you.
Given that, I don't know how much more discussion we need to have tonight, given there's a much lower attendance than I was expecting, given the number of RSVPs we had. And I hope this didn't feel like a waste of anyone's time. I do apologize for the low turnout, but it's not something I can really predict. We actually had more people at our Rio Vista meeting, which actually surprised me given the RSVP numbers, but again, not something that's predictable necessarily based off of RSVPs. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Karen. Our emails are there. Our phone numbers to our office numbers are there. And then there's also information on our website. And this will all get posted also, this video. So the information you guys shared, even though we didn't have a big audience today, it will get shared on our website. So people will be able to see what you guys presented and shared.
I just, sorry to cut you off. I just added the, in the comments, the chat there, is our residential burn permit and also our LE5 general burn permits. And then you also see the broadcast burn, the LE7, LE8. So it takes you to one of those three. You just pick which one, and that's how you apply for the burn permit. Fairly simple, fairly easy. This platform has been available, I believe, since January 1st of last year. But it really started getting used this winter for the first time. So it's really user friendly. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Rob. I think the meeting is adjourned, but you're welcome to stay on and keep talking. I think Karen will probably stop recording soon, unless anyone else has more questions. Thanks, Morgan.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording then. Thanks, folks.